Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition podcast, sponsored by the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. I'm Brian O'Connor, adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Chicago Booth, and joining me today is Chris Killackey, partner at Prairie Capital.
Hey, Brian. How are you?
Thanks for joining, Chris.
Yeah, absolute pleasure.
So I think our viewers and listeners would love to hear a little bit about your background and your story pre-Prairie and what you're up to today at Prairie Capital.
Okay, fantastic. Started my career in banking here in Chicago in a group of gentlemen actually who had started a business unit at American National Bank here in Chicago to help entrepreneurs transition their businesses. Effectively, when that bank went through a series of acquisitions, we spun that out and created Prairie Capital to do the exact same thing. So we were mezzanine providers back in the day and kind of morphed into change of control buyout shop, and have been doing that now for our 20th year next year. 20th year next year. Yeah, and I mentioned to you, we just completed our 6th fundraise. So yeah, happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Well, congratulations on all that
success.
Thank you.
Chris. Appreciate it.
What can you share with us about Prairie, and particularly your unique sort of positioning in the world of entrepreneurship through acquisition? I know that you've gone through a couple of iterations in this model, everything from working with search fund entrepreneurs to an EIR program of your own. What can you tell us about how those things have sort of manifested over the life of Prairie?
That's great. Well, we are definitely focused on being the first provider of change of control capital to a family or owner who's for the first time taking on a partner. So the fit with ETA for us, it wasn't something that we kind of knew about out of the gate, but as we kind of became familiar with the model, it's a great fit, right? Because some of those owner entrepreneurs, they needed a partner in the near term, as opposed to having a 3 to 5 year window. And so in certain situations, it's an ideal situation to partner with young, highly educated person who wants to be an entrepreneur themselves. There's probably a window through which they can be, for lack of a better term, have someone who's kind of showing them the ropes, and then they can take on that leadership role of either CEO or president, if not out of the gates, over a kind of prescribed period of time. So it fits well with kind of the fundamental kind of mission of our business, which is to help people transition their businesses to that next generation, management, whatever it may be. And then, over the course of time, it's gone from probably a simple kind of blocking and tackling, kind of a defined subset of people and situations to a little bit more creative, right? Because there's a whole bunch of things going on in that universe these days. You mentioned us. Our first exposure to ETA was through a gentleman who was in our shop, worked with us for a couple of years, went back to grad school, and decided that he wanted to raise a search fund. So came back to us, we backed him. We were among the people that backed him, had a series of people out of another university, and then some of the people that were funders and backers of us. And so we're actually towards the end of that situation. It's been a phenomenal outcome, but learned a lot about that space and some of the things going on. And so flash forward, we recently had a gentleman go through UFC, familiar with what that gentleman had done, familiar with ETA, wanted to do it, but wanted to do it in the context of a captive searcher within our organization. And so this is probably about 2 or 3 years ago, approached us about like, look, I love working here, and I want to do 2 things kind of simultaneously. I want to find companies on behalf of the firm generally, but in those situations where there's a need for change in leadership, I'd love to be kind of a captive search person inside of Prairie Capital. And so he's actually right now sitting inside of a company in the Southwest. He's the CEO of that company. Something we chased really hard together, and as we got deep down the path, there's a lot of blocking and tackling that needed to take place there. And so he made the decision, like, I'm gonna go do that, get to know the business, build a rapport with the team, build a further rapport with the entrepreneur. So we'll go through kind of the checklist of things that needed to happen before it's ready for sale, and then we'll engage in a partnership together. And so he's the CEO of that company right now. Very unusual.
What a great story. Now, is this something, clearly it's gone in the right direction for both Prairie and for this entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Is this something that you've, as an organization, thought about institutionalizing and replicating?
It'd be one of those things that we're certainly not against the concept. It's very situational, though, right? It's got to be someone who's coming out of that career progression where they know they want to go the role of being an entrepreneur and being an operator. And they're probably looking at opportunities where they're going to need a third party to help them kind of affect and finance that. Now, he went through the decision of, I don't want to necessarily go through raising capital. I want to start right now, and I know exactly what I'm looking for, which is why there was a nice fit. I can tell you that kind of based on where it's gone to date and where we think we're heading, I'd be absolutely open to it. And I think for the right set of people, right, private equity is a crowded landscape. And so I think it's a phenomenal way for him to have kind of, hey, I want to cut right to the chase of being an owner, being an entrepreneur, having an economic opportunity kind of tied to the business that I'm growing and developing. So yeah, for the right person, I think it's a great fit, and I'm guessing that there's probably a lot of right persons out there, quite frankly.
Let's talk for a minute about that right person. So for Prairie or Chris Killackey individually to be compelled to work with a young entrepreneur, a searcher, a future sort of first time or relatively inexperienced CEO, what might you look for in that person from a skill set, background, quality of person, the qualities that sort of they exude as a person? How would you characterize that person?
It's really behavioral, right? Because I think largely speaking, the profile of most searchers are deeply intelligent people who've got great educational backgrounds and certainly have an interest in entrepreneurship. But as we're diving deeper into who they are and whether they're going to be a good fit with stepping into an operating role in a company, now we're looking at companies that generally have less than $100 million in revenue and $10 million of cash flow and can go as low as 15 and 3 along those continuums. So, these are small companies in the grand scheme of things. We want to know that fundamentally, in that person's background, somewhere, somehow, either that be through the progression of their career and decisions that they're making or actual direct experience, it'd be great to see some semblance of entrepreneurism, right? I mean, that you're focused on kind of small and having an impact in maybe a smaller pond than, you want to be the president of the United States type of thing. It's got to be a little bit more willing to get your hands dirty, your career replicates that, and if you've actually had some semblance of being an entrepreneur in your background, family business, maybe you did something in college along those lines, those are really big differentiators for us from, hey, as this person moves on to that next role, are they going to be successful?
Yep. So those are some of the qualities and attributes. Any red flags that you look out for and maybe taking a second sort of guess as to whether or not this person's going to be able to perform in an entrepreneurial and operational, specifically in this lower middle market space?
I would say for us, if it's a team, so you have two different types of searcher, right? You've got the individual who goes out, and then historically, right, it's been largely teams. So for us, getting back to behavior, it's really going to boil down to, do we have some kind of identifiable kind of point in time where these people either have a deep history together or hopefully some type of operating history together, working together, whether that be in the same organization, whatever it may be. We want kind of a deep and long-term connection where some of the normal challenges that they're going to face as they become kind of partners in a company, there's a basis of an established relationship there from which to kind of make some decisions and hopefully learn together. If it's a new partnership, I would tell you, like as a great example would be, two people who've met each other in grad school. There's tons of smart people, and I think that's a great, great starting point, generally speaking, but that might not be a deep of enough relationship to know that you're going to work well together. And you've sat in that role, and you just know there's just a lot of stuff that you're going to be hit with. And so you definitely want to make sure that you're happy being in the foxhole with that person. If you don't have a long-term tenure with them in some way, shape, or form, it's tough to divine whether you're going to be successful as a team as you kind of move on to that next opportunity. Right. So that would be a red flag for us.
Right. The flip side of the coin.
Yeah.
What do you believe a prospective searcher or an entrepreneur in residence might be looking for in Chris or in Prairie as a partner?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because they're usually meeting us for the first time. I mean, they're like no other buyer of a company, like every other buyer of a company. They want to know they're going to get their deal done, and it's going to get done on the terms and conditions that we kind of agreed to in the beginning, right? So at the end of the day, I think that they're just like any other independent sponsor, fundless sponsor, searcher, or maybe another PE firm that's partnering with us, right? Is this a good partner? Is my deal going to get done, assuming that every kind of comes out in diligence, and then is it going to be done on the terms and conditions that theoretically we've kind of agreed to? Now that becomes a little bit more difficult to, again, make sure that everybody's on the same page where, there's been situations where a searcher needs help, right? So, it may be a situation where they want the person selling the company or the family to know there's a critical mass there from financial support. And so, we could be getting involved much earlier than there's an LOI that comes to us from a searcher and they're looking for a partner then. We're actually very happy to get involved early to try and, number one, we've got experience here. We know this person, believe in this person, and kind of evidence that through our presence, right? And through maybe support letters or something along those lines. So it's about, it's both ways, right? Everybody's got to make sure that they've got the right person that they want to be dealing with. But I think for them, it's no different than anybody else, right? I mean, they're these good people who are going to deliver, and they're going to do it on the terms and conditions that we've agreed to. It's that last piece that's just hard to kind of sometimes know exactly what that is, depending on what level we get engaged at.
Right. You talked a little bit about the decision to go to loan
Yeah.
versus a partnership, and how there might be an additional element of risk or uncertainty around a partnership that needs to be figured out and in a lot of cases tested. How have you seen situations maybe not go according to plan in a partnership environment, and how has that been remedied?
Yeah, I think a common one is, right, if you have a partnership in particular, there tends to be this bifurcation of someone's focused outside the business, customers and market presence, someone's focused inside the business, operations and kind of all other. And I think that sometimes, right, generally speaking, most of the people who go fund a search or go into search are extroverts, right? So they're all kind of good from an external standpoint. And so, but at the end of the day, there's a choice that gets made, and whether that's a correct choice and you need a mid-course correction, whether the team decides that or whether we collaboratively decide that, I think that the biggest thing from a success standpoint, whether it be us, the searcher, we've all got to be on the same page of understanding that it's a bit of an organ transplant, right? I mean, it's just this fresh kind of operating talent coming into an organization that may be the first time with people of that significance coming into it. And so just understanding that, you know, it's human beings, and we've all got to be on the same page about being very open and very candid about how that's going from both company standpoint, how that's going from team standpoint, and being open to kind of feedback about getting to the right spot. Setting that kind of dynamic early as part of the governance process, as part of the team, as part of the diligence process. Yeah. You see some of these things play out in diligence. It's just a really important kind of dynamic for us to have. So, you know, I think you want people that, look, recognize this is my first rodeo, and maybe I've done things on a smaller basis, but they want the feedback. They go, hey, I can't see it myself sometimes, so let's make sure that there's a mechanism by which we're talking about these things.
Yeah, a healthy combination of confidence and humility, such that they might be confident in their actions, but understanding that there's someone that has done this before, and they're going to leverage that experience to help them maximize the likelihood that they have a successful outcome.
Right, and that balance, I mean, that's what we do all day, right, is for the companies that we focus on, you got to be super confident about the fact that you can help these people, but you better be humble about the fact that they've forgotten more that you currently know and probably will, you know, about their company. Sure, and so it's that balancing act for everybody.
Sure. Chris, let's fast forward a little bit. You've decided to back a searcher, a search team. They've made an acquisition, and now you and Prairie are involved in that business, in the operation and the effectuation of the strategy. What does that involvement look like on a day-to-day, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter basis?
Yeah, so it's going to change over the course of time, right? So from beginning of investment to end of investment, or as it matures, our involvement in the early stages, and this is the same for every one of our portfolio companies, you know, there's the diligence and there's a time frame that we set to kind of attack the company over the course of the first 12 to 24 months. In particular, that first 100 days, there's a plan that we put in place in terms of, you know, key finishing some of the things that we found in diligence from a foundational standpoint that need to be laid, and then some key kind of, whether it be information systems, metrics, dashboards, you name it. And so there's a ton of work in those first 100 to 180 days in particular in our involvement. You know, we're probably going to have at least weekly kind of operating phone calls as an example, and then it just really depends on where the company is in that progression of its evolution, where those things eventually kind of wean themselves down to quarterly board meetings. Now, from a governance standpoint overall, entrepreneurs, right, so the searchers are always on the board with us, right? There's going to be usually, if it's two or if it's one, they're both going to have representation on the board for sure. And our process is a very flat one, right? I mean, unequivocally, we've got control. It's just the nature of what we do, but, you know, it's a collaborative process with those entrepreneurs, either the ones who are former owners of the business, who probably rolled significantly and remain from a present standpoint, or our searchers. You know, we've set kind of a plan in place. We're not moving forward and making that investment unless we're all on the same page about what the plan of attack is, and then it's just a division of responsibilities, right? So it could be bringing some third-party resources to bear that are in our Rolodex. There's going to be the internal stuff that both the entrepreneur and the searcher are working on, but it's just a division of labor and then kind of a constant checking on where are we in this process, and to earlier terminology, you know, what are the course corrections we need to make.
Yep. In all cases, is Prairie fair to assume that board seat in all cases?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And help us sort of understand, you know, in this lower middle market, generally speaking, we're talking about a board, you know, constructed of, call it 5 individuals.
Yeah, and so we're probably going to have, you know, typical construction would be, we're going to have, it's usually more like 7 for us, where there's going to be 2 or 3 from Prairie, Management's going to be represented, and then what we always want is people from outside, the kind of the subset of either investors or managers, for a couple different reasons. Number one is knowledge about a marketplace. Number two would be just a Rolodex, whether that be corporate development opportunities, whether that be operating resources. And then we generally, probably in particular with a search situation, we like someone who's had an operating background, who's kind of come, hopefully, from the industry space that we're in, to help kind of mentor those new entrepreneurs. And hey, to go from 15 to $50 million, this is what I did, this is the experience that I had. It usually ends up being an accelerant, I guess, in our experience, to their development, right? I mean, there are those things, you've done them, right? Those nerve-wracking decisions of, I've got to make some hard decisions about this company. And so having a sounding board who's actually sat in the role that they're sitting, we just find it to be an extremely valuable thing. So
how often is that a retiring or former CEO of the actual target?
It's almost, well, that would be in addition to the retiring or former CEO. Yeah. So, and that all just depends on kind of life situation and where they are and how much involvement they want to have with the business. Generally, right, I mean, they're partnering with us because the business has gotten complicated and they want help and they want to steward. So if you take away some of the blocking and tackling stuff that's not so fun and have them focus on strategy and where this business is growing, it becomes fun for them. And so they're deeply engaged and they're incredibly valuable. But what we really want is, we want someone who's had that operating background of doubling the size of a company and expanding geographically, product sets, whatever it may be. Whatever the thesis is for that company, we want to have someone who's kind of taken a company in that direction successfully as an additive to the whole governance process, and then a definite mentor to the searchers.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been about a decade since you and Prairie have been involved in this world of entrepreneurship through acquisition. How has the landscape changed for a prospective searcher, and what are the unique challenges and or opportunities that you see for search teams or independent searchers in today's environment versus maybe, say, 10 years ago?
It's exploded, right? So it's hard to describe, I guess, both just the level of even our knowledge of people who are out there with active searches going on, and then I would say the universe of people that are approaching us about, I'm thinking about this, right? And what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the risks? Is it something that I should do? And so it's a much broader universe. I would say the profile of searcher has also changed. So it's not just necessarily someone coming out of grad school who's made the decision to go the route of entrepreneurism through acquisition, as opposed to maybe a corporate route or a larger firm route. It is people who have been out of industry, for a long period of time, and who are kind of come back into the working world and decide they're going to do that directly by being an entrepreneur. It is established executives, who maybe are going to go the route of through either friends or family or institutional capital. They're going to put together a search fund. They're going to find something, but they have more of an operating background themselves. This isn't their first rodeo, and so I wouldn't say it's getting any younger. To us, it's probably kind of skewing towards an older, more experienced person who wants to be an entrepreneur, and they've heard about the model, and they're going to explore the model, if they haven't already done so by the time they get to us, and they're going to go find a company to buy. And they've got an operating background and maybe even a Rolodex, so they've got some targets.
Would you guide a current top-tier MBA student that might be considering a path like this to go and get some operating experience before deciding to pursue this path?
It's kind of funny. I mean, for sure, right? I mean, no better way to kind of make sure, do you really want to do, entrepreneurship sounds great, right? But it's a ton of work, no doubt about it. And there are probably very unsexy aspects to the job. And so to get a taste of that, and like we said, we're behavioralists. We want to see that stuff in someone's background as it is. And as much as we can see of that, I think the better off they are and the better off we are. Now, it's hard to get sometimes, though, right? In terms of, to get the level of experience at the level that they're going to have it, if they move into the role that they will as a searcher, is it close enough, right? And do you see enough to really kind of know and understand this is something that you want to do?
Sure, and as you get further and further advanced in your career, life gets in the way of having the flexibility to be able to conduct a search or do some of these things. What final piece of advice or words of wisdom would you have for someone contemplating a search fund or generally a path in entrepreneurship through acquisition as we sort of wrap up our time together?
Yeah, I mean, there's a deep body of people who are engaged in it, either have been. You're a great example, right? Go talk to someone who's been through the process from kind of soup to nuts and really dig into what that experience is. And don't just focus on the successes, right? So focus on some of the places where things didn't go right or there was failure. And then what is the experience that you drew from that? one thing that I tell people all the time is, I mean, it's not always going to work out, but there's tremendous learning experiences, even in those situations that don't work out, that you'll carry for the rest of your life into either trying again or into different aspects of your career. And so most people doing it are very success oriented, and they should be. But you know, there are lies, damn lies, and then there are business plans, and it doesn't always work out. And so making sure that, because it maybe go back 10 years ago, it might have been really hard to do that. I mean, it was really kind of niche-y. You had to work hard to find those people. You still have to work hard to find those people, but seek out places where it didn't necessarily go well. And just really make sure that come hell or high water, this is really something that you want to do from an experience standpoint. And theoretically, right, I mean, if you're focused on the experience and focused on being a good entrepreneur, a good operator, sucking in as much of that kind of opportunity experience as you can, you'll turn it into something economic over the long haul. But in the near term, you know, it doesn't always work out the way that you want it to.
Chris Killackey, partner at Prairie Capital Partners, thank you very much for joining us
Thanks,
today.
Brian.
Thank you to the viewers and listeners tuning in. This has been an edition of the Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition podcast, sponsored by the Polsky Center at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business.